like actually feeling excitement in my body. And, it's interesting. Um, I had a discussion today with one of my coaching clients about something you and I have talked about before, which is like the noticing how similar anxiety and excitement feel.
Mhm.
So I want to play with this idea of us turning our focus inward. For those of you listening and or watching, the practice that I want to take us through to get started today is this idea of noticing how sometimes when we're learning how to feel our emotions, it can be super scary because, anger can feel like this really big emotion. Excitement, when we want to have more excitement in our lives, it can also be really scary because excitement and anxiety feel very similar, and our bodies are like, wait, what's happening? So I just want to, like, right now, I'm kind of in this energy of excitement. And I just want to invite all of you to like turn your gaze inward. And when I say turn your gaze inward, you don't have to close your eyes. But what I want to invite you to do is just maybe start at the top of your head. Pick something to focus on in your environment that feels either safe or interesting. And as you're like, find an object to focus on and just sort of like allow your vision to sort of soften. And you can keep that fixed point or you can close your eyes and just notice as you turn that softness in towards you, in and back into your body. Notice whatever's going on inside your body right now. Notice the sensation of it. Is it a feeling? Is it a smell? Is it something that you have within your vision that you're noticing connects in your body? Is it something you're hearing outside that might be causing you some discomfort, or maybe what you're hearing is allowing you to feel soothed? Notice the sensation of like, are you sitting? Are you standing? What are you feeling in your feet? What thoughts are you entertaining right now? And are those thoughts bringing you sensations of comfort or discomfort? Our thoughts and our feelings are very much woven together. Our thoughts drive our feelings drive our thoughts. Just noticing that these feelings, this emotion, oftentimes comes about first from a sensory level. Our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our touch, like being in contact with the chair that we're in. And just noticing what sensations that brings up in your body, what thoughts that might bring up in your mind, and what's the story that you're telling about them. Like for me in this moment, feeling a little bit of excitement in my body and noticing the difference between having felt anxiety in my past, loads of it sometimes, and the stories that came with that versus the sensation inside my body right now that I now identify as kind of an excitement, a newness, a freshness, an adventure, being on the edge, and just noticing that there can be a subtle difference in the energy, but it can feel very similar in the body. But the stories and the thoughts that go around that are usually where things start to separate, start to deviate. So just having that awareness, asking yourself, sometimes stopping throughout your day You could do this at any time throughout the day. What am I noticing in the sensations? And what's the story I'm telling about that? What's the thoughts that are coming up? Thoughts are the language of our mind. And feelings are the language of our bodies. So, are you ready to play?
So ready.
Ah,
You're feeling excitement and I'm feeling like calm and peace, like the wind outside I hear, and then like the fan blade of the rotation. Abraham talks about that, like sometimes focusing on like an AC motor, and I'm just like that low, like but yeah, let's do it.
So, where is, like, noticing where you're at right now?
Mm-hmm.
What are you feeling and sensing in your body? And are you aware of, like, what that used to maybe have a story about versus what it is now?
I think the calm, there probably wasn't ever calm. I wasn't ever calm and peace in my body. But if you're talking about excitement and you're talking about anxiety, yeah, like anxiety is what used to be a norm, but that's like resistant to feeling something, right? It's like a not wanting to feel fear, or fear is what really comes up for me. Anxiety is what I think is like a repression of fear, or a tamping down, or a suppression, of fear. And so, yeah, they can feel very, very different. And I'm curious on the vibration scale, like where does hertz wise, like what are the two? But yeah, anxiety was very well known in my body for many, many, many years. But that was all just from a place of like, fear felt very scary, right? And so we just don't want to feel it. So we just try to push it, and it just continues to get more and more and more until at some point you can't contain it anymore.
Yeah.
What about for you?
So, what I was noticing in my body is this excitement. And this excitement used to feel very much like anxiety, like I was out of control. Anxiety for me was this, like, I can't predict the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I have stories from my past experience that say, if you do this, that will happen. If you ask for this, that will happen. And so I always try to be very controlling, planning, controlling over what I thought was, my future. And the areas where I didn't have control, or the areas where I was like, all predictable outcomes say that this is going to be what happens. Um, and I can't fix what's happening right now. Like, I'm out of control. So noticing that, when that was in my experience, always wanting something different. And yet here I find myself back in anxiety again, back in anxiety again. And what's changed for me now is, like, transcending a lot of that fear. I'm not 100% fearless. If I was, I wouldn't be a human anymore.
Yeah.
But noticing that, I have now moved more out of my head into my heart. My heart's like, girl, we're totally fine. All possibilities exist. And we've moved from possibility in my head and my thoughts to probability, or probability in my head. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. To possibility within my heart. And so noticing how the sensation of excitement for, like, what's going to happen next?
It's like wonder and delight, right? Like what we were talking
Yes.
about before. It's like for so long, my past was laced with, in childhood too, was laced with unknown, was laced with fear and
For
worry
sure.
and concern and out of control and unknown. And that was very, very scary.
Hmm.
Versus now it's like delight and wonder and awe and like what is going to happen. And really you had said something about like anxiety, and it's like us not being okay with the present, right? Like we're trying to either, I mean, anxiety is like worrying about our future, right? That's where anxiety comes from, and depression is more so thinking about our past, you know.
Yep.
And really it's like avoiding being present is what it, you know. So
Hmm.
being with, like you're saying, like being with the awe and the wonder and inviting that in versus thinking, oh, this is too scary, I don't know how this is going to end up. Same exact circumstance, right? It's just like, how do we
Hmm.
want to look at it and view it by?
Yes. And so what our viewers and or listeners might not be aware of is we're kind of loosely talking about the 35th key, if you follow Gene Keys, or we follow Quantum Human Design with Karen Curry Parker. And with that, the gate 35 is all about experience. The key of 35 has a shadow of hunger, a gift of adventure, and a Siddhi of boundlessness. And so we have played with the idea of setting up some specific talks around those things at Who University on our podcast, like an extension. But one of the things that we are striving for is to show you how this relates in our everyday life and how these experiences show up in everyday life. So, one of the things that we're playing with in this idea of experience and in the idea of the shadow of hunger is that we're always looking for and asking for more. Um, and where we've had stories in our life about asking for more is either not okay, or stating what we want is okay or not okay. And so, yeah, that's what kind of I was hoping that we would get to play with today, because this is part of why I'm excited. I have, we talk about up leveling, right? One of my big things, I think on our last podcast, I had to stop at least a couple of times to go to go to the bathroom. Um, that this experience that I'm having right now, why I'm so excited is because I just figured out, wait for it, that I can want things and that's okay. Like I am not only free to ask myself what I want and to want things, but that I am deserving and worthy of it. And I don't have to justify my wants. Oh, like what? How has that
there's
shown up for you?
there's two parts, right? There's the, some of us have been told, like, I think Tanya and I are such a beautiful composite. I don't know what the word is, right? Like,
Amalgamation.
there you go. You know, Tanya grew up not asking, maybe not knowing what she wanted, not feeling like it was okay to ask for what she wanted.
I got shut
That,
down a lot.
okay.
Like I would ask for things and be told, no, we can't afford that.
Yeah.
We can't do that. Yeah. And so I stopped asking.
But there was some shame or guilt around you asking.
Oh,
Whereas
yes.
I always wanted things, like I think for money for us, like I've never been ashamed of having money, wanting more money, wanting all of the things that I want. That's never been something I've had an I don't want to say issue with, right? But that's been a sensitive spot for me. But it was always like, how is that going to happen? And I had probably in childhood too, like, we can't afford that, you can't have that, you can't. And so in the same way, we both were shut down for asking, right?
Yes.
And so, I think going back to the two of us, like, having that different perspective of, you're now coming in to be like, wait, what? I can just want something because I want it, and I've always been like, yeah, we want something because we want it. We don't need to give a reason for it. And then my side has been like, and I don't have to work hard for it, or I don't have to earn it, or I don't have to, there hasn't ever really been guilt. I don't think, okay, let me say this: guilt for things I wanted for fun, right? So buying a house, a nice house, probably was raised with like, those are the necessities, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was never an issue. But spending money on what I love, travel and fun, there was probably shame and guilt around how I spent my money for a while, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's not, somewhere along the way, right, I learned that probably wasn't okay to spend money on fun like that.
Yeah. And for me, I had the experience as a kid where we did some family vacations. We had, like, presents was the thing that for me was, and I'm not like talking about present in the material form, like we think of a gift, but presents was one of the greatest gifts that I was always wanting to receive. And oftentimes there was a lot of bad things that happened around that when I had somebody's presence and or actual physical presence. Like for me, if we were to just use money as the example, for me, I grew up understanding also that you had to work hard for money, but there was also this disconnect in that for me, love has been like, love is my everything, the connection with others. And my grandmother would, she was a part time line cook at Montgomery Wards in her late 60s, early 70s. Um, I think late 60s is how long she lived. But she didn't have much money. She didn't have much of anything, but she would give me gifts, right? She was always very giving. And so I grew up kind of with this um, that you just give, 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 give. That's love. You give, 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 give. But I had a receiving problem because every time I would receive money or love, it usually came with a lot of painful conditions attached to it. Receiving money was the shame of having been like molested at, I don't know, I was around 8 or 9, and him giving me money to be quiet. It was being in 2 horrendous car accidents where I had some severe injuries and then getting money for that. So for me, like, receiving was painful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the only way that money would come to me was painful, and then oftentimes the only way that love would come to me was painful. Um, Whether it was emotional abuse, or I didn't suffer as much physical abuse as say my brother did, but that was like, that programming was in me as well. And so um, for me, the wanting more, the hunger for more, which was just innately in me,
All
like
of
it's in
us, right?
all
It's
of,
in all of
exactly,
us. It's in all of
exactly.
us until it gets shut down.
Yes, it's nature. If
That's my
you
child.
if you look at nature, I love going to nature
Yeah.
versus the other humans, because it allows us to have a different perspective on something that we are essentially the same as. You look at nature, and you look at any time, like, I love some of the pictures. I think it's from Chernobyl, where cities have been vacated. Like once the humans get out of the way, nature just retakes its space.
Yeah.
Like nature's always expanding, wanting more. It will take over, and it doesn't, it's like, oh, am I taking too much?
Yeah.
Like
Unapologetic. Yeah.
unapologetically, it just takes back what it, there's space. I'm going to expand. I'm
Yeah.
going to grow.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the experience of being able to feel excitement in my body about not only saying, I want something, I don't have to justify why I want it,
Mm-mm.
took a tremendous amount of healing to get to that point, because now I'm also like, I am worthy to receive it.
Yes. We think we want things, right? We think, oh, I want this, and I want this. I was just asking a girlfriend the other day. She was making a couple of comments and I'm like, but you're not ready to receive it. And she said, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, if this and this were offered to you right now, would you accept it? She's like, I have a lot of guilt with that. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about, right? You're not in a receiving mode and
Mm-hmm.
we're blocking it. So we think like we ask for things, right? We ask.
Yeah.
And our part is also to be able to receive. But if we aren't feeling worthy enough, if we're not feeling lovable enough, then we don't get to receive it the way it's meant to actually come to us, because we have so many emotions that block that receiving.
Yeah. And sometimes that can come up in a way that seems like it's very noble. For example, um, I am staying with a really good friend right now while my husband and I are looking for a boat. So we've been on this quest to find the boat. And I have said a number of times, I'm going to know it when I get on it, because my body will be like, yes, right? And in this process, I have had to start really looking at my ability to receive. Early on in the searching, we looked at this boat that was $1 million. And I was just like trying to wrap my brain around, like even asking for that, like even thinking that it was possible. And going out and then seeing this boat and then realizing this is not the boat. Like my whole
And
body
it's
was
not
like,
worth $1 million.
and
And
it's
it
not
was
worth it,
not worth $1 million. I would not
right?
pay $1 million for that boat. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But noticing like the shift in my energy when I allowed myself to believe. And I had a bunch of conditions around, okay, well, if this works and this works and this works, maybe it will be possible, in my exploration of playing with the idea of what can I allow myself to believe is possible,
Mm-hmm.
like this $1 million boat. So recently in my email box was delivered a beautiful catamaran. And I just remember looking at it when I first opened it up. I was like, I'm not going to show anybody this, because I just want to I'm like, it reminded me of when I would go in and peek at the presents that my grandmother had for me in the closet for Christmas. But I was just looking at this going, oh my gosh, like just playing with the idea. Now, this boat was like a $9 million boat, people. It's like way to 10x the $1 million boat. Like looking at this boat going, oh my gosh, this would be so much fun. Like I could think about all the people that I could have on this boat, how like I could have people come on the boat that I could pay well, like just imagining myself with, like this abundance. And in the past, I would have been like, mm-mm, you're asking for too much.
Yep.
Like I've heard all my life, too much, not enough.
Yeah.
So I played with that, and then I shared it with you, and you were like, oh, that's a
Panty dropping.
that's a panty dropper. Like, woo.
I'll be on that boat. I have no problems being on that boat.
Right. Right.
Ah.
So in having a discussion with my friend, um, he was like, oh, that isn't the right boat. That's the wrong boat. Like, why would you even spend time looking at that? Because at some point I decided to share it with my husband and my friend. And he was just like, that's the wrong boat. Like, could you imagine pulling up into Haiti with that boat? And here are these people that are like struggling to survive when you could sell that boat and take that $9 million and do so much with it. And I'm like, okay, well, who's buying that boat then? Who's buying that $9 million boat? And
Go ahead.
and his response was somebody that like has more money than God and really has like no emotion or.
This is what we do with money. We taint and story, right? All of
Mm-hmm.
this like money. I've never had money as evil. I've never thought that, that
Oh, I did.
people
Whew.
with money, are evil. I've never thought that. I've always thought like it's an amplification of who you are. Like if you're a good person or you're a, giving person, you're just going to give more. And if you, are stingy, you're just going to be more stingy. But I have had that story around like, having to work really hard for money. But what I think is interesting is I think, and Abraham talks about this too, right? Like we don't serve the world when it's like who suffers more, right? Like the idea that he's like, well, people in Haiti are suffering. And so we shouldn't, it's like, are we all supposed to sit around and just suffer and who wins the suffering trophy award, number one, versus there are people that I watch that are like, they're doing it. It's a possibility for me too. And I know Abraham
Yes.
talks about this, like not coming off of your disc, to come down to the level of where people are in disbelief or not in possibility. And the beautiful thing, and I know I've talked about this before on previous podcasts, is like we get to keep our beliefs, right? Like we get to keep, if we want to, we can believe that we can never have that, or we can
Mm-hmm.
believe that we can, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
like, where do we want to be? What do we want to play with? And that sometimes isn't necessarily a flip that switches, immediately, right? For me, it's taken some time, but to sit here and say like that because someone has money that they would, the way I interpret it is that like you should feel guilty that you have that because
Mm-hmm.
other people don't, and
Well, this
yeah,
is
like
this is that beautiful amalgamation of you and I, because we have stories about relationships, we have stories about money, we have stories about things, we have stories about everything. And where money specifically is concerned, you haven't had a story about it being evil or corrupt or dirty or
mhm,
tainted. Whereas me,
yeah,
I had all kinds of stories and experiences, and this comes from my mom. This comes from my grandmother, right? This comes from my father. Um, my little brother stole when he was young and was beaten within an inch of his life by my dad, right?
yeah.
So there's this: don't ask for more. Don't ask for like beyond what you are worth or valuable of. um, there's this story that money corrupts, money is evil, money is painful, you have to do disingenuous things in order to have it. And so there's a lot of like shame. You were calling this out early on, right? I had a lot of shame around money, about receiving it, about having it. Um,
And how can money come if we think it's evil and we think it's, you know,
corruption.
corruption? And I mean, if you were just, people don't think about money like they think about a person, right? But it is similar, right? Like it's just energy. It just is just, right? It's just this constant exchange. And when you think about, who wants to hang out with you if you're like, you're corrupt, you're evil,
Yep.
and the same thing for me, because I had a belief around like you have to work really hard. So of course money's not going to come to me unless I'm working hard and I'm efforting really hard, right? Because that was my belief and we want to make them true. right?
Yep.
We want to be correct, or I don't want to say right, but so it's,
Our
we
human
block our receiving.
survival
Yeah.
has been built on being right,
Yeah.
the rightness and wrongness of things. And so for me, like even this week, diving down deeper into um, that duality of, money used to be pain, receiving it was painful, it was corrupt. And also, like, if you've got money, you should just be giving it. Like my whole life is modeled after that. Give, 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 give. But it's giving out of the sense of I need to be valuable. I need to make an impact. I
It's
need
also
to
giving
be,
out of shame and guilt that you have it, right? For some
yes,
people, like some people want to just give it all away as soon as they get it because they don't feel worthy of having it. So we like sabotage ourselves and we're not even aware, right? Like, well, we should be giving all of away. It's like, well, no, no, no. First and foremost, our I don't say allegiance, right? But it is to ourselves, right?
yep,
That is ultimately, right? And so just like the airplane, you're not going to go saving all the other people until you've put on your oxygen mask. It's the same thing with money,
yep,
right? Like, are you taking care of yourself? Are you, having, and I love, you know, practicing just having money, because I think having money and saving money can be a very different energy. For me, saving money always came from a fear of I'm not going to have it, I might lose it, or it's hard to come by, that kind of thing, versus having it is just like, do I want to have this, or do I want to have the experience or the thing, right? And just like practicing, what does having money feel like? But yeah, I think people a lot of times will be like, let me just give it away because it's that I'm not worthy, right, of having.
mm-hmm,
And what does that feel like, having that amount of money in your bank account? And I know our feelings come generated from ourselves. It's not the number on the bank account, right? But if
mm-hmm.
you're not practiced in having and being that person that has that kind of money, we will self-sabotage to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's just like you look at so many people that, like, I talk about, I won the lottery. I won like the jackpot all the time because of my relationships. And I know one day I probably will win the big jackpot just because of, we speak into manifestation, especially when we're in belief and alignment with that energy of allowing ourselves to receive. But if you look at so many people that have either won the lottery or came into a lot of money, if their identity, if their belief, if their vibration does not support that,
Mm-hmm.
they can't hold on to it,
Right.
right? So my friend, in his looking at this and thinking like you could do so much with that, brought me back to a book that you and I have both read called The Soul of Money, and the author's name is escaping me.
Lynn Twist.
Lynn Twist. And she was talking about she was a very big philanthropist, right?
Her and her husband had a business, and then they were very interested in the philanthropy and the Amazonian people, and
Hmm.
yeah.
And there's a part in the book, it's been a couple of years since I read the book. Um, but there's some pieces that just really deeply connected. Like, what is our identity? What are our beliefs? What is that structure that has come through? And how do we how do we like fix that? In the past, I have thought, if I won a bunch of money, I would be like Oprah or Ellen. I'd be like, you get a car and you get a car. But I was also very aware that there was this part of me that was mm, like maybe I'll pay off that person's house, but I'm not going to give them cash because I think they'll just go waste it. Or I would give certain people money that I think would be good with it, but not others. And I was like, ooh, even in that belief, there is this judgment of how this person is going to use this money.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of my practice has been like letting go of that, give freely without expectation of what they choose. Like maybe they need to actually explore that duality of, I'm just going to waste it all away. Waste. Maybe it's not really a waste. Like I've had times in my life where I've gotten chunks of money and then spent it on just stuff.
Yeah.
But I needed to, like, cleaning out our house, letting go of that stuff that we had accumulated was me trying to reproduce that love and connection that I had with
Feeling.
my grandmother, right? That
Yeah.
feeling. And since getting rid of it, I now see where that gave me the experience, the contrast, the perspective of living out the duality that we are as humans, right? Having the experience of trying to satisfy, to feed and nourish my insides with those things. And so, I now have had the experience. I don't need those things to nourish me. And I can want a $9 million yacht just for the fun of having it and the experience of sharing. And I could receive that. And then also noticing now, just like the perspective of those that have said, I wouldn't go on that boat versus you like, Pate, I am there for you, right? It's just this difference in beliefs and what we're able to receive and how we're storing our wants and whether that's okay or not okay, which, leads back into that hunger piece. What are we hungry for? In the Gene Keys, it talks about within the shadow, there's always this repressive or reactive state. And the repressive state is bored. And the reactive is to keep ourselves so damn busy doing all of the things, looking for that thing outside of us to fulfill. Like the very thing that we're searching for, we have to find within ourselves first. Like I thought things were going to make me feel better, but then there was all this shame and guilt and stuff attached to receiving it. And also this shame and guilt was the energy behind giving it.
It's like the same. I talk about this with like a checklist, right? Like of in my repressive mode, right? Of being busy, of like checking the college box and checking the CFP box and checking the, different houses box, and then the income box, and then the how much is in investable assets box, and the checking the boxes. And then you get to the point where you're like, what the fuck is happening? I'm not happy, right? And that fulfillment, here we go with back to the hunger, right? That fulfillment has to happen within. And even though I don't consider myself a keep up with the Joneses kind of person, like I've always kind of just done my own thing. But society standards of like, doing the things, right? Like people buy a house and then you have your kids college save for, and you like do those things. And realizing like, this isn't making me happy, and it's not making me feel any safer, right? Having a house paid off did not make me feel any safer. This is not, and so realizing that, wait a second, if it's like this now, it's always going to be like this until I like really do some of the deep work within, right? The fulfillment within that we have to generate. And then having those things because we want those things is a totally different feeling than if I get here, if I have this saved, if I have this paid off, then I will finally feel XYZ.
Yep. And that goes along with like what we've talked about, goals too.
Yeah.
We set these goals thinking when I get to this place, then I will feel a certain way. So we're in that striving to try and get there. Versus like what you and I have shifted into now, it's setting goals is different. We think about the goal is sort of just like the vehicle. This is the playground in which we are going to explore the journey to get there. Like it's always about the journey. It's never about the actual destination. So like I would love it if you would share from that hunger standpoint of that reaching outside of us, what the difference of goals that you set now versus what it was like for you in the past.
Well, you know, when you have as a child, like I think goals as adults, we just move them from childhood, right? Like they become money goals or they become these weight loss goals or whatever it might be we're doing, right? To finally receive the love that we may not have felt or received when we were younger. And if we're always withholding, you know, I used to be like, that's so cliche. I hate that. It's not about the journey. It's about when I actually do the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here we go back to the checklist, goal after goal after goal that I was achieving. I wasn't feeling any different. If anything, I was actually feeling more stressed, more pressured, more unfulfilled, more lifeless, more. It's funny, like Grayson looked at pictures of me when I was like 10 years ago and she was like, Mom, you look so much younger now. And I'm like, because I was lifeless when I was 32, just going through the motions, you know? But it's so true when you aren't living, when you aren't feeling on a daily basis, when you are just like, at some point in the future, I get to experience and live.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that these goals is what's going to make us feel a certain way. And so for me, goals were always laced with pressure.
Yep.
And shame and guilt if I didn't achieve it in the time frame or, you know, so goals were a very negative connotation. And I think this is important because I've had some coaches be like, well, no, you've got to do the work to actually like, you know, if you have no goals, then you're not actually doing the work you need to do that's bringing up the stuff. I agree with that. And also sometimes we have to almost go all the way out for some people. Like for me, I kind of was like like I was all the way in. For a lot of things in my life that I've changed over the last couple of years, I've had to go completely out, like the opposite total way for me to then come back and decide, okay, in the middle, right? Like,
yep.
And it's different for everybody. And so you just have to, check in with yourself and like what feels good. But goals were always, it was just pressure filled and disappointment, right? Like it was like, here we go again, versus now, like when I texted you the other day and I found a triathlon in Honolulu and I was like, yeah, like I want to sign up for that because it'll be fun. There's the travel part and like, what is my body capable of? And like, I've already been doing it for a month, training for it. But like, now it's like, okay. And just even on my run this morning, like envisioning like, okay, they talked about it being flat land and they talked about going by the Honolulu Zoo and this experience of we get to experience the goal before we actually do it, which can sometimes be a mindfuck because you're like, how does that happen? Right.
Mm-hmm.
But really it's just, now it's like for the fun of it, it's like, what are we actually capable of achieving? And not from a place of achieving and I will finally feel worthy, or I will finally love myself, or I will finally be kind
Have
to
enough
myself.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be thin enough to be desirable, whatever.
Yeah. It's from that place of, I already am whole. I already am worthy. I already am lovable. What can we do? Right? Like, what can this body do? What can this
Mm-hmm.
mind do? What can we create from just sheer fun of doing it?
Yeah.
And it not meaning anything about you, right? I think for so long goals were laced with like, if I didn't hit it, what did that say about me? Versus if we have a goal now, okay, well, maybe I just need to tweak something, or I need to, if I'm just using the triathlon, right? Like, okay, so for my goal is I'm just going to finish it. I was watching like a YouTube video about like 10, I don't want to say they were saying 10 mistakes, but they were like, listen, it's your first one. Just go out and have fun. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. Right. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and don't, go like hardcore on the swim, like you've got to have your energy. And it's just like, yeah, we're just doing it just to do it. And then if we want to continue, right, then we can fine tune, but like, it doesn't mean anything, right, about us. And I think we've laced all goals, a lot of us lace goals with our worthiness, our lovability, versus like, let's just go create some shit. Let's just have some fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And allow ourselves to want to do that just because we want to.
Yeah.
And being able to feel that now is also that receiving. It's that practicing being in the feeling of what it is that we want to receive. And that's such a critical piece I think so many people miss, is the receiving part, allowing ourselves to receive. And that's needing to deconstruct all of these old stories, needing to deconstruct this habit or pattern in which our bodies respond to certain stimulus. Like, our bodies are this incredible machine that has held all the information from our past, both our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents, etc., and our own collected experiences that we've had since childhood. They hold all of this information for us. And some of that is like the things that we need to destroy or deconstruct, allow to die.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the scariest parts of facing this internal hunger, this experiences, like having to be in the experience of discomfort and allowing ourselves to just be with it, to move through it. You were talking about anger earlier, and for me, for the longest time, feeling anger wasn't safe because it was very explosive, right? I shied away from that very much. My childhood experiences had me like shrinking. Just stay small, stay out of the light. Don't let anybody see you. Certainly don't let anybody see the real you. If they knew the thoughts that you'd had, like the shameful things that you'd done or believed, all of those things were in my body. So just like we were talking about at the beginning with the excitement versus the anxiety, and you with goals used to be pressure and guilt and the potential for failure,
That
right?
was a big one. That was huge. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
with grades, right? If we talk about failure is like in trouble.
Yeah. Versus now, that sort of almost nervous anticipation, that fun, in this training can feel sometimes very similar in the body, just like passion.
Yeah.
Like, I am freaking passionate about liberating people from these cages, this belief that we're supposed to stay small. So if I pull up in a $9 million boat in Haiti, it's not to be like, look what I got, I'm partying. Like, how you're feeling, what you're experiencing doesn't matter. No, it's an entirely different energy. It's the energy of, this is possible.
Yeah.
I used to believe
it wasn't possible for me.
It wasn't possible for me, that I was not worthy of this.
Yep.
If you want them to be able to grow, to expand, they have to be able to ask for more.
Yeah.
And receive it. We have so many, like, I just had this visual in my mind of a bunch of baby birds in a nest with their beaks, like their heads kicked
Yeah.
back and open, like, feed
Feed
me,
me,
feed me,
mommy.
feed
Yeah.
me, mommy, right?
Yeah. All compete. Yep.
Yeah. Um, it's like there's so many of us that want for more. I want to be respected. I want to be valued. I want to be seen. I want to be heard. But if you can't be that in your body, you cannot receive that because you have no idea what it means to feel respected. And that's where it always starts with us first. People sometimes might think that we're selfish when we say, no, it's always got to be me with me first, secure my own oxygen mask first.
We are being selfish. We are taking care of oneself first. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I would totally like to rewrite just about all of humanity's story, that is the wrong way to be. And we see it on a large scale where people are screaming for their respect, their freedom, their ability to choose and want, and they're being shut down and told that they're wrong, or that they're asking for too much, or that they're not worthy of that. And so for this narrative to change, we first have to change it in ourselves as individuals.
Yeah. We got to go first.
And then, like what you and I do, is modeling that in relationship as we're having these transformations within ourselves. And each time we meet, we have this opportunity to be like, what's it look like on your side?
Mhm.
This is what I experienced. Oh my God, that was scary. This felt like crap. I've been in the bathroom 10 times today. How's your body responding? What is being liberated for you, right?
I want to say also, so I think there's several levels, right? I think there
Mhm.
is that level of people that want more, but they aren't receiving it for themselves first, right? I think also there are people that are so shut down. And I was in all of these different stages, right? I was in the stage of like, what's the point? I think for 10 years, I didn't even have goals because it's like, well, what's the point? You know,
Mhm.
you're like indifferent, which people think indifferent is like, um, it's not really like anything, but it's like worse than anger. It's like depression, right? On that vibrational scale, indifference is it's not even going to happen. So why try? And so when people come out of depression and they go to anger, that's actually a good sign because you're actually rising along the vibrational scale.
Yep.
But as a society, we're like, whoa, we don't know what to do with this anger. You need to tone it down. And then sometimes people can go back to depression, right? So
Yep.
there's that indifference is where I was like, what's the point of having goals? And what's the point? Nothing's going to happen. It's not going to be this way. Then to moving toward, no, I want this too. And being mad that I can't have it, right? And then working towards it's possible, and maybe I don't want to say neutrality, but like being in this possibility. And then now kind of where I'm at of like it's totally happening and having fun with it and allowing it and being in that vibrational match of being able to receive it, right? And doing the work. When I say deep work, what I mean is doing that soul searching work of like, I am worthy, and not just repeating these affirmations. That's the other thing that people talk about. It's like just these affirmations. It's like, no. We're not talking about just repeating affirmations. We're talking about the stuff that comes up when you want something and all of those emotions that we have repressed and suppressed, actually feeling them, right? Not
Mhm.
eating them, not working them, not sexing them, not Netflixing them, not shopping them, not all of the things we do to escape them, is being present with them and actually feeling those feelings we have suppressed for so many years.
Which is part of like yours and our work together here has been like, sometimes we gotta mess things up for people a little bit to create awareness, because so much of our society, our world at large, and we see this a lot in America, and like I'm looking forward to traveling to other countries and seeing how it shows up there. But we have this, we basically have The Walking Dead, the show
Yeah.
The Walking Dead.
I haven't
It's
seen it, but I can imagine,
it's
right?
really it's
You're just
it's
walking
really
around with
modeled.
zombies. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really modeled after our current state of being, in that we're just not aware. We're just not aware. So part of the work that you and I do, um, for ourselves, for each other, and for those outside of us and in close proximity of us, is to create that awareness. And usually that awareness comes from some discord, some chaos, some
Something
having
has to happen.
things.
I don't want to say something has to happen, right? But that's typically what happens, right? Something happens, a circumstance happens, and we get to decide. First of all, first we become aware, like, oh, this is a choice, right? This is how I am feeling. And then we get to decide, how do we want to look at this? How do we want to feel about this? And, but not, but not before actually feeling how we actually feel, right? And
Mhm.
so allowing those feelings to come up, allowing that to rise, whatever you might be feeling, moving through it, processing it, and then being like, okay, now how do I want to look at this? How is this actually happening for me? And choosing powerfully and being empowered versus resolving to the fact of like, this is just the way that life is, and, all the things.
Yeah, it's having the temper tantrum. I was
Yeah.
just talking to a client this morning, and she was talking about her child having a temper tantrum, and how her parents, when witnessing these temper tantrums, get very uncomfortable and
To shut
want
their child
this
up.
yeah, I want this child to
Mhm.
stop. And I'm so like, huh, because her parents are like, no, she'll be okay. Just let it run its course. And, within a couple of minutes that happens. But in all fairness, there are a lot of us that have spent so much time in the deep freeze
Yeah.
that we are just completely out of touch. And like you said, oftentimes, unfortunately, something something big has to happen to really create that chaos that rattles our awareness, whether it be being diagnosed with a disease, or um, losing someone that we care about, or going through some sort of big stress, or even a natural disaster. Um,
Losing
that,
jobs, businesses,
yeah,
things of that sort, like that sometimes is part of the reason why it's happening, is to shake some shit up.
yeah, yeah. Um, and we always, I don't know if this is true. So I don't know that I can say that we always. It has been my experience, and a lot of people's experience around me, when I studied trauma training through Dr. Stephen Porges and Peter Levine and Irene Lyon, um, that we usually exit our trauma the same way we went in. And by that, meaning that if you look at nature, again, the animal, they're, depending on where you are in the food chain, so to speak, um, you're either going to be prepared to fight. Then, if that doesn't work, be prepared to flee. And if that doesn't work, then we freeze. We self anesthetize so that we don't feel what is essentially imminent death. We have these experiences in our lives. And what I have witnessed with pretty much everyone I've coached, everyone I've worked with, myself included, um, we will first start the thawing process. When something happens, we're like, we need to become aware. I remember when I very first started coaching, and my coach was saying, well, you need to become aware of what it is you're thinking. And I'm like, what am I don't know. What am I thinking? I thinking? I'm thinking I don't want my husband to leave. I'm thinking I can't figure out what the hell is going on with my calendar. I'm thinking like, but within that, asking starts to create awareness around, and we'll move out of sort of this frozen state of being into um, into almost like the resistance. The flee is also very much resistance. Like I want to push this thing away from me. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to deal with this. I just want to get away from this. Like, how can I let it go? Like get it off me. Um, and then into anger, and that can feel very um, very scary, because just like you were saying, our vibration rises. The amount of life coming back into us has grown, right? um yeah, so when we talk about doing the deep work, we've probably got some people listening that are like, okay, well, how? And if I could offer any gift, um without any strings attached, I would say, think about who it is that you want to become. Think about who is it that can receive the money that I've wanted, the relationship that I've wanted, the body that I've wanted, the health that I've wanted, whatever it is. And just keep exploring that question, like in curiosity. Who would I be if I could receive that? And the rest of it stuff is going to work itself out.